On this episode of Africa's Big Switch, the ABS team sat together with Edma Ohima Lawa. Edma is the International Ambassador to Ghana for the University of Westminster and currently works as the founder of YEW Global, an NGO that caters for young entrepreneurs by promoting and creating opportunities for them. She's also the CEO of ELO Petroleum, an oil and gas mining company that's located in Ghana, West Africa. She's also strived to pass all the odds and gain experience in multiple industries. She's been a news anchor and also a morning show host for Ghana's leading TV shows. We thoroughly enjoyed speaking to Edma on this episode, and we hope you enjoy it as well. Thank you.
Welcome to another episode of Africa's Big Switch. Today I'll be hosting with Beatrice, and we'll be speaking to Edma Lawa, who is just a really cool person. She works in the oil and gas space. She's done a bunch of things, from anchoring shows and on the news to, setting up a youth empowerment program. But I'll let her tell us about herself. So hi Edma, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm fine.
Great to have you on this podcast, and I'm excited to tell your story. I'm excited for you to tell your story. Could you give us a quick intro about yourself, if that's okay?
Absolutely. I'm going to summarize it and try and make it as short as possible. But my name is Edma Lawa. I was born and raised in France, and I moved to the UK when I was quite young. I have a first degree in oil and gas management and a master's degree in international relations and democratic politics. I moved to Ghana from the UK about 4 years ago, and I've been working and living in Ghana since. Right now, what I do in Ghana, I have an oil and gas service company where we are specialized in manpower supply and equipment and material supply for the upstream sector of the oil and gas sector in Ghana. And I am also the founder of the Youth Empowerment Wave Global, which is a youth organization or a youth non-governmental company organization that basically caters for young people. We engage, inspire, and empower young people to use their vocational and technical skills to establish business for themselves. And we do conferences that empowers young people for them to also get into entrepreneurship, which we believe will help minimize the rate of youth unemployment, especially when it comes to graduates who have just gotten out of university and are still looking for a job, and so on and so forth. So that is basically what I do at the moment. But I was once also a news anchor for one of the leading English-speaking TV stations in Ghana. I used to read the news, and I was also a TV presenter. So I've done quite a lot since I've been in Ghana, but so far, this is what I do.
Amazing. So what was it that drew you to the oil and gas industry?
Okay, so initially when I started university, you're young, in the UK, you start uni when you're 18. So you're 18, you're young, out of high school, and you really don't know what you want to do in your life. I was one of those. It wasn't something that I've always planned to get into. So I actually did my first year of uni. I did a degree in sports science because I loved sports, and I felt like I could contribute doing a degree in sports science when it comes to that specific field. So one time I was speaking to my grandma, and she loved to find out what was happening in her grandchildren's life. So I was speaking to her, and I told her that I was studying sports science. She was like, "What is that?" And I was like, well, sports science, it's like the science aspect of sports. And she was like, okay, so what if one day you move to Ghana? What are you going to do with that degree? Are you going to work for the Black Stars? And we both started laughing. And I was like, okay, hold on. maybe I should rethink about this. Bear in mind that I've already, nearly completed a year of doing that degree. And eventually, after what my grandma said, I was like, do you know what, let me just go and research and maybe do a course that is more international, a course that I know wherever I find myself in the world, I would definitely find a job, and it'll be something that I love. I'm the type of person that I can't sit at one place. I love to be very active when I am being productive. So I did some research. Funny enough, an oil and gas management degree was the first degree that popped up when I typed in degrees you can use to work around the world on Google. So I was like, okay, let me read about it. So I read about it and I just fell in love with the industry. I loved how challenging it is. Still is. I loved how male dominated it was, in the sense that it would be a challenge for me. And like I said, I don't like to be unproductive. I don't like to be in a space where I feel like everything is just so easy to achieve. I do love a challenge. I do love to feel like I'm making a difference in a specific or a particular sector or field. So I then decided to apply for an oil and gas management course, which I did. And the rest is history. I just fell in love with the sector. After that, I also noticed how political the oil and gas sector was. And I decided to do a master's degree in international relations and democratic politics, but related to energy. And that's basically what got me into the oil and gas sector. And I decided to keep going even when I moved to Ghana and establish myself in that field once I've moved to Ghana.
And just out of curiosity, do you have any hopes of joining the Black Stars? Because maybe you can still do it. It might not be too late,
I think it's too late right now. I don't see myself going back to school and doing the sports science degree. No, I think it's a bit too late.
So now you're in the oil and gas space. You mentioned something that I'll probably touch on later on. But now you're in the oil and gas space. You're operating in that space, and you founded your own company called ELO Petroleum.
My initials. I wasn't too creative with it, honestly speaking.
I see. Oh, that's interesting. So ELO Petroleum, how has that been? Tell us about that business.
Honestly speaking, it's been an interesting journey. Like I mentioned, I've been in Ghana for 4 years now, but initially when I moved here, I worked for a company for about a year, and then I got myself into the whole media space. So I would technically say that I've been my own boss since last year, May. So I would say it's been over a year now, and it's been an interesting journey. It's been a feeling one. I didn't think that it was going to be easy, but then I also didn't think that it was going to be as easy as it is for me in a sense of the connection that I've already made before getting myself into the sector properly or officially. So far it's been an interesting journey working in that sector in Ghana, and I'm sure as we would all agree, regardless of where you find yourself, the energy sector itself, it's a community. It's like a bubble that if you don't belong in that community, or if you're not in that bubble, it'll be very hard for you to understand, or it'll be very hard for you to operate, and so on and so forth. So it demands a lot of networking. It demands a lot of having meetings here and there, talking and getting to know people, even if you don't like it, even if maybe, let's say, you're an introvert and you just don't see the purpose of having to speak to so many people, having to go to conferences every now and then. You would see that it's required when it comes to the oil and gas sector, and it is required if you want to progress in what you do. It's one of those sectors that your network is your net worth, and it's quite hard to believe, but then this is what it is. But it's been a very, very fulfilling journey for me.
So you've actually made 2 points that are quite linked together. You've just said now that it's one that requires lots of networking and really who you know and who you have a connection with. But also you previously mentioned when you were giving us a little bit of an introduction to yourself about how political the space is. So I was just wondering from you and your point of view, what do you think are steps that someone that wanted to get into the industry could take to kind of start to open up their network a little bit? Or can you give us examples of things that you did or places that you visited or events that you went to kind of begin your journey in the industry?
Okay, so like I mentioned, when I first moved to Ghana, the company that I actually worked for was also an oil and gas company, was an OMC company actually. And I used that opportunity to build my network, since I was not only new in the industry in Ghana, but I was also new in the country itself. So one of the things that I had to learn was the work ethics of the people in the country, how the system itself works, and the systematic behavior of Ghanaians within that sector. So that took me a while to understand. It took me a while to also get around it with regards to how people work. And I'll just give you an example. Sometimes I would go for a meeting. I would literally schedule a meeting with somebody who I feel like could maybe be a potential partner. I would go to their office. I would arrive at, let's say 8:50 because the meeting is at 9, and I can literally be there till like 3 p.m. in the afternoon until the meeting is done and conducted. So it's one of those things that you would understand when it comes to certain parts of the world, that wherever you find yourself, people work differently and people understand the work differently as well. I was not used to that. I was used to, punctuality. I was used to doing things in a certain way until I moved to Ghana and I saw that people had a totally different way of doing things. So one of the things that I would say you would need if you want to venture into the oil and gas space in Ghana is patience. Have patience, know that everything is a progress and nothing happens overnight. Build your network, and building your network can also be hard because, like I mentioned, it's a bubble. So unless you're in the bubble, you wouldn't know what is happening. So one day you just wake up in the morning and there's a conference happening and you're like, wait, how come I didn't hear about this? But then you see that people in the auditorium and you're like, wait, so how come I didn't hear about that? And they did. And you now understand that you need to get into that bubble for you to now even get to know that there are conferences regarding specific topics in the oil and gas sector. So building your network, it is very crucial, making sure that even if you have one contact, you use that contact accordingly so you can build other contacts within the sector. I was slightly a bit lucky because, again, I worked for an OMC when I moved to Ghana, and then I got myself in the media where I would interview people who belong in specific sectors, and specific fields as well. So that slightly also made it easier for me to build that network. But then for somebody who has not been in my position, I would say it all starts with, if you're getting a degree, for example, in that field, and I don't know, I've never studied in Ghana before, but then from my university in the UK, what they did is that they had little societies that you could, belong in, and these societies will introduce you to other societies within a specific field, which for me, it was the oil and gas sector. And I got to participate in these things. It's optional. You don't have to do it. But then I felt like, since I didn't know anybody in that sector, it would be great for me to participate in these little, conferences at uni and make friends at uni, and use that to basically also build my network, not just in the UK, but there were a lot of international students as well, a lot of Nigerian students actually. So right now I can say that I have friends from uni who did the course with me, and they are back in Nigeria too, that I can call and be like, oh, do you know what, I'm trying to do this or trying to do that. They can also advise me on what's happening in Nigeria, and also give me some of their contacts that they have in Nigeria. So it's little things like this that we disregard in life, but could go a long way. So these are some of the advices that I can give to people. Always have your ear on the ground. Make sure that if there are any groups or any societies, you join them and then build your network from there.
It sounds like you've been very intentional about the way you've gone about essentially building your network. Yeah. Because even you just mentioned societies, joining clubs, but also making sure that even if you only know one person, you try and maximize that relationship as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Also making sure that you maintain it in the right way, but also obviously offering them some kind of value as well.
Yes, definitely.
Which is great. So I guess looking more generally, to begin with, obviously we know that Ghana is one of the fastest growing hydrocarbon markets in Africa at the moment, with all sorts of discoveries recently in the last decade or so, and so on. So can you tell us a little bit more about your company and where exactly you fit into this value chain? Is it primarily in the upstream? Is it just in the upstream? Or do you kind of venture into midstream and downstream as well?
So I am mainly in the upstream sector. That is where I have a permit to operate. So in Ghana, we have different companies, or let's say different organizations that cater to the operations or to the sector functioning in a regulated way. So for you to be able to have a company or a service company, local content that operates in the upstream sector, you would need a permit. So I have a permit to basically operate solely in the upstream sector when it comes to the services that I provide, which is manpower supply and equipment and material supply. So we basically don't go on the field. What we mainly do is, if there are any projects going on and we know that, okay, there are specific people that are needed or specific skilled professionals that are needed for a job, we have a data pool of skilled professionals, from divers to medical doctors, carpenters, and so you name it, so on and so forth. So we are able to go through our data and eventually provide these skilled professionals to whatever job is needed for whatever project is going on. So that's what we mainly do. And that's what we are mainly specialized in. So I would say we don't do anything with regards to gas itself, because gas is also another sector that you would need another permit to have a company to regulate in. So we mainly basically operate in the upstream sector, but when it comes to EP.
And from your experience so far, what's the most sought after skill set, or what groups of skills are most sought after at the moment from your experience?
Okay, so some of the skills that I've noticed that are truly needed, of course, is mechanical engineering. Those are very much needed. Welders. When it comes to also the mining aspect as well, it's very needed. When it comes to caterers, like I was saying previously, that it was one of the parts of my job that really shocked me when caterers kept popping up that they were needed for some projects. And I think also finding out about medical doctors being needed, divers also being needed for offshore's project. That was also very interesting. And I guess it just expanded my horizon when it comes to what exactly goes on within the oil and gas, exploration and production project. So it was also a learning point for me to also know that, okay, these are some of the skills that are needed on site, on the field. And if I would want to be successful in what I do, I'll have to make sure to expand my data and make sure that not just specific skilled professionals are able to go on our website and apply, but then we open it to everybody who we believe would contribute to a project. So that was a bit of a shock for me, but then it was also a learning point for me when it comes to establishing this company.
You mentioned something about applying. So there's a demand from the oil and gas companies. They need a certain type of skill sets. They come to ELO Petroleum. How does ELO Petroleum, I guess, source this talent? And what does that turnaround time look like? And maybe you can give us maybe a walkthrough of the customer journey. So an example of maybe a profile, and maybe talk us through it from the demand from the oil and gas company to how you, ELO Petroleum, has provided that service. I think that would be great.
Okay, so I'm just going to summarize everything. So usually, because that is the permit that I have, and we have a permit to supply manpower to projects. Usually when there's a project ongoing or when there's a project that is about to start, we do get a list of things that are needed, of course, for that project to be successful. So bear in mind that I am not the only local content, or I am not the only service company that provides these services. Other service companies also provide services. So it's basically it's more of a battle of the fittest kind of thing. And what usually the process is for us is that we will go through the list once we get a hold of what is needed by all these previous many companies and from the Petroleum Commission of Ghana as well. And then we will now start working on our part with regards to making sure that our company is able to provide. Because one of the things is that because the oil and gas sector is a very small sector, you would want to make sure that if a contract is awarded to your company, that you deliver, because word does get out quite fast, and you would want to be as professional as possible. You want to make sure that your company is known for being capable of delivering once a contract is given. So one way for the company to also source out talent is we have a website, like I mentioned previously, and the website basically is open for all skilled professionals, regardless of your work experience, to apply for it. All of that detail is on the website for you to fill in, how long you've been working in a specific field, if you have a degree for it. Because one of the things that you would also realize is that a lot of, let's say, engineers, or let me just use like welders also, some of them don't have specific degree, like let's say an oil and gas degree, but they have certificates and diplomas and so on and so forth that they've progressed into their role and acquired whilst working. So you will have to find out about their work history and how best they can fit into your company that will be represented them when they go off to work on such projects. So these are some of the steps that we take to recruiting people. We also do partnerships. So, for example, like I mentioned earlier, I found out that caterers are one of the most outsourced companies when it comes to an exploration and production project. So one of the things that we tend to do is we tend to have a partnership with them. So I'm not going to go too much into details as to like how we break it down and, percentages and so on and so forth, but we have a mutual agreement. They come on board, but then we represent them as a company, as a local content, because they would not be allowed to work on an upstream project if they do not have a permit, and they can't just have a permit for a catering company. So usually what we do is that we partner with them, we come to a mutual agreement, they do their work, they get their commission, and then we get our commission. So that is some of the processes that we go through. A success story is being able to give a medical doctor the chance to also work on a project in Takoradi. There's a place basically called Takoradi in Ghana where a lot of ongoing, since we discovered oil actually in Ghana, that is where it's located. So it's called Takoradi, and it's in the western region of Ghana. Or is it central? Whichever one, but yes. So one of the things that I was able to do, and that was my very first time given employment to a medical doctor, and I got to find out some of the certificates that they need to have before they can even go on an upstream or let's say EP project. So it was quite interesting, but these are some of the stories that I can remember. Again, we are still fairly new. We've only been operating for a year and a half now, so we're still learning. And so far, this is what has been working for us as a company. But I'm sure there are other methods out there that other people who have been in the sector for much longer are using. But so far, that's how we've been operating, and it hasn't been too bad.
That's cool. Thank you for that. I think for me personally, it kind of paints the picture, so it's clear in my head. So thank you very much for explaining that. Yeah, I'm sure you've explained it like a million times before.
I try my best, and I try to cut it short as much as possible.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. So before this, like a few days ago, Beatrice actually sent me something from Business Day Nigeria, like a media company. And it says that about 11,000 Indians are going to be employed to work on Dangote's refinery in Nigeria, which is, one of the largest refineries in the world when it opens. Yeah. And it goes back to the rhetoric to say, is it that we don't have a lot of skilled workers on the continent? So, okay, maybe they're not Nigerians. Maybe we can get them from Ghana. Maybe we can get them from other parts of Africa. We are living a whole continent that has a high unemployment rate to go elsewhere to employ people to work on our plants. And I remember I spoke to on Africa's Big Switch, we spoke to Princess Ntubeni, who works in the nuclear space. And she said something along the lines of, we have a lot of highly skilled nuclear engineers, South Africans, locals who are really good at their job and who are even exported to work like as experts in other countries. So my question is, I don't know how familiar you are with this whole Dangote refinery situation, but if this is true, that we're going to employ 11,000 Indians to come and work on Dangote refinery and just ignore the Nigerians, what's happening? Like, I think that's my question. Like,
I mean, this conversation is a conversation that, I think everybody in that space, everybody in the oil and gas space is having, especially if they live in an African country and they are a part of a project, or maybe their friends or family members are part of a project. It's one of the conversations that we've definitely been having in Ghana here as well, with regards to expat, and even, let's say, expat earning more than, our local skilled professionals, which, honestly speaking, is it fair? Is it not fair? What do they have that our local skilled professionals do not have? Is it the level of education? Is it the level of experience? What is it that differentiates the two for them to even be earning more, or for them to be chosen over a local skilled professional who probably have worked the same years as the expat that is coming from another country to occupy that position? So this is a conversation that we've also been having in Ghana. From my understanding of this, is that, honestly speaking, this is how it's been for a very, very long time. If we look at some of the agreements, or if we look at some of the policies surrounding the oil and gas sector, or surrounding a specific project in Africa, you would see that it was always, okay, we have the resources, you have the machines, you have the expertise, so you come to our country and you can do whatever you need to do. So far as you explore and you extract oil, commercial oil, in a quantity that can be sold, then we are okay. We get our percentage, you leave and you go to another country and do your project. So this has been a way of doing business for a very long time when it comes to international oil companies coming to Africa to do business. So it has stuck with us, let me say. So now that we are trying to break away and introduce our skilled professionals into the field, and to also let them know that we have skilled, let's say, Ghanaians or skilled Nigerians who are also capable of occupying these positions, it's becoming a conversation that we are always having during conferences and summits, but then nothing is eventually being done about it. It's not fair. It's not fair. And one thing that I also noticed when I moved to Ghana is that, I don't know if it's the same thing in Nigeria, but in Ghana, some people do value things that are international more than things that are local, even when it comes to products. When a product is locally manufactured, or when a product is locally made, it's seen as, it might not be good enough. But then when it has been imported from, I don't know, a Western country or from the Middle East, it's like, okay, do you know what? We will consume these products without even knowing what's in it, just because it is imported into the country. So I think it's a mindset of people, and is one of the systematic behaviors that I was talking about initially when it comes to people behaving in, or some people in Ghana behaving in a way that I had to then sit down and understand why these behaviors are being projected by the people. So it is worrying. I do believe that Nigeria, being the most populated country in Africa, definitely do have skilled professionals to occupy this position at the Dangote refinery. But what is the issue? Why are they not being selected? Why do they have to come all the way from India? I think these are the question that we need to ask ourselves. And eventually, when you hear some of the answers, when it comes to, okay, they are more trained, they've used some of the equipment before. And honestly speaking, it's also sad. I remember, I'm just drifting away from the conversation just a little bit, but I went to an agriculture event. I don't know why I went there, but I was like, let me just go and see what's happening in that sector as well. And I found out that some of the machines that countries in the UK and in France have been using, some of the students that are studying agriculture in Ghana have never even seen such machines before. But then this is a machine that students abroad actually use to even study, and not even to work, but to even just study. So then you also now think of the gap in education. Yes, we might have the same education, we might study the same course, but then you also have to now start questioning the quality of the education that you're receiving. And it's wrong, but then I think if questions are asked, we would understand why, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. I think it's a very complicated matter and complicated subject. I would agree with you around the point that you made with people in African countries, for example, Ghana and Nigeria, potentially appreciating things that feel a bit more foreign than local, which is a bit unfortunate, to be honest. But at the same time, you also didn't then mention that you think, from your point of view, you think there would be the required skills and necessary skills in the country, in Nigeria, for example, to potentially fill those positions. But I was just wondering from your point of view, because you then went on to say, to explain around, obviously, exposure to certain equipment, certain technologies that maybe people that would be coming from India or from other foreign countries would have exposure to, that people in Nigeria, or for example, Ghana, might not have that exposure. So do you think there's some kind of opportunity for more exposure, more formal structured training or development programs that can expose people to those kind of roles and those kind of skills and training that can put them in a better position if they were competing against people from other countries outside of Africa, for example?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that I believe when it comes to the oil and gas sector is that it's also depending on what field you're in. But since we're talking about the upstream sector, and we're talking about the Dangote refinery, it's one of those sectors that the more you practice, the more you know, and you can have a theoretical understanding of what is meant to be done, but then it's the practical side of the theory that counts the most. So sometimes you'd see that you'd be applying for a job, for example, and they're asking for 3 years experience, 4 years experience, 5 years experience, and you're a junior and you're just thinking, where am I going to get all that experience for me to eventually get this job that I'm applying for? So you realize that it's all based on experience. It's all based on you eventually being on the field, like I said, depending on what sector you feel like you belong in. If it's an option sector, it's about you being on the field, it's about you working and you learning. The good thing about this is that the more you learn, the more you're able to do your job appropriately and efficiently. I can never stand next to a machine and pretend that I know what I'm doing, because I wouldn't know. But then maybe a mechanical engineer will know how to operate that machine, because not only that they have studied it, but they have also practiced how to operate this machine. So at the end of the day, it all boils down to the quality of experience that one can provide. And unfortunately, I don't think that African countries provide that quality of education or even experience or practical experience, let me put it that way, for people to expand their imagination or expand their knowledge when it comes to this particular sector. So it's always that, okay, I've done maybe my first degree in mechanical engineering. Now I am traveling abroad to do my master's. You see that this scenario is very, very common in the oil and gas sector. I know quite a few people, not just here in Ghana, but also in Nigeria. Even when I was doing my own oil and gas degree, I mentioned that there were a lot of international students, there were a lot of Nigerians there, and they have come from Nigeria to basically understand or have a degree and be able to have a practical understanding of the field that they want to go in, but abroad, because some of the the materials are available over there, but then it's not available in their respective countries. So then you ask yourself, what is being done? I remember going to a conference, and I did ask a question with regards to, policies being implemented to enable young people, especially, to venture into the oil and gas sector. And the answer that I got was, we are doing training in senior high schools. We are doing this, we're doing that. But then it was just specific countries that, not specific countries, sorry, specific companies that will go ahead as part of the, CSR to basically do these courses with young people. But then it's not an actual policy. It's not an actual regulation. It's not an actual law that young people must acquire certain skills to be able to compete internationally with other students or with other graduates when they graduate from university. So there are a lot of, factors hindering why one would be chosen and one would not be chosen, depending on their experience, especially if it's an experience that they acquired in Africa.
Based on that, I'm actually quite curious to, hear from you and see if you have any thoughts about how that kind of gap can be filled. So that gap of experience, because in my mind, I was previously thinking, is there some kind of program that can be put in place to allow people to train abroad where they have access and exposure to these technologies?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
So one of the things is that those kind of, as we all know, those kind of courses, those kind of courses or those kind of programs, that was the word I was looking for, are very expensive. And it is very hard for a government or a company to say that, okay, do you know what, we are taking you through training, and we are going to basically take you abroad for you to have a hands-on experience or one-on-one experience on a specific field. One of the issues that were raised recently when I went to local content conference was that companies will go ahead and train their employees, and then eventually the employee would leave the company to go to another company, or they will leave the company because, I don't know, they are not satisfied with one thing or the other. So then the company also feels like, okay, I've spent so much money training you, but then now you're leaving to go to another company. So what I heard during that conference, the story has not been too successful. I mean, I'm sure that some people who they've trained have stayed with them for many years, but some of the stories that were told were quite devastating as well. So now it's like, where do we move from here, and how do we make sure that these trainings are given to employees from companies or even from the government? Like, let's say the Petroleum Commission does these kind of programs as well. So it's like, what can we do to make sure that it's something that maybe, let's say, we do every year, or it's an annual program that must be conducted. It's mandatory for it to be conducted. So I think that these are the kind of questions that we ask ourselves every day, or us in a sector, we ask ourselves every day, and we make sure that certain things are changed so that people can equally benefit from being in that industry, and also feel like they can be competitive when they go to other countries if they want to, and still have the same position, still have the same salary as somebody who maybe studied and have worked their whole life abroad.
Wow. I know it sounds very complicated, and I guess for us at ABS, it's something that we'll be watching closely. And I'm sure there's, like you said, there's a lot of people that are working on this issue, and there's a lot of companies that.
Yeah, it is. It's a very complicated situation,
Yeah.
and it's a situation that, of course, as a company, you're investing into your employee,
Mhm.
and you, in return, you want your employee to contribute to your company, and you
Yeah.
want them to be efficient. You want them to be at a level where they can contribute,
Yeah.
and your company would also profit from it. But then when you spend so much money on training them, and then 3 months or 4 months down the line, they leave, you as a company feel like it's been a bad investment, like you've made a bad investment. But then you can never also prevent somebody from leaving
Yes.
unemployment. So it's like, what do we do now? Is it a risk that we take, or is it a risk that we don't take, or we
Yeah.
just leave it as it is? So it's a very complicated situation, but I think companies and governmental bodies to still go ahead and give as much training to their local citizens or to their local skilled professionals, so that they can also be able to occupy positions that international expatriates are coming into the country to occupy.
Yeah. And we're getting to the end of the podcast now.
Yes.
And I know, like, I would love to just sit down and just keep hearing you talk about this, and how you're working in this space. But my final question before our usual bonus question is, what are some of the lessons you've learned on your journey that you think would be valuable to some of our listeners? I know during the intro, you mentioned something about getting into a male-dominated industry. So maybe that's something you might touch on. And maybe also your global and the work you're doing in that space.
Okay. Well, honestly speaking, the advice that I would give to anybody who wants to venture into the oil and gas sector, especially in Africa, or wherever you find yourself in the world, honestly speaking, I feel like it's the same, is that you need to be able to you need to love challenges. You need to be able to deal with challenges as well in a way that it's going to not only benefit you as a human being, as a lesson, as a journey of progress, but then is also benefiting the people around you. So having patience also is one of the key elements that one needs to be in the sector, especially in Africa. Having worked in both continents in this particular field, I would say that it's very, very challenging. Working in the oil and gas sector in Africa, patience is definitely needed. Always making sure that you're on top of your game in terms of knowledge, in terms of news, in terms of new policies being implemented. Always make sure that you're learning. You don't stop learning. The fact that you've acquired your position does not mean that that's the end. If you want to be efficient in your role, or even if you establish a company for yourself, like I've done for myself, you always need to know that, okay, I this is my theory and this is how I work. I need to know more than my employee. I need to know more than the people that work for me. And not only would it be easier for you moving forward and making sure that leadership is established, but it also helps with you advising your employee in terms of what to do and doing the right thing as well. Because as a leader, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have the knowledge, then how are you able to lead? So always make sure that you're learning, always make sure that you're building your contact, love a challenge, be a risk taker. I love taking risks. I wake up in the morning and today I'm like, what can I do to, give me a high blood pressure? So, so basically just making sure that you love what you do. You have to have a passion for what you do as well. It's one of those things that it can be quite devastating, especially if you are the owner of the company. You'd wake up today and getting a salary, for example, every single month, like working of a 9 to 5. So you realize that there are so many things that needs to be implemented when it comes to making sure that your company is successful and is actually generating income. So and discipline. You have to be very, very disciplined. You have to know what you want and you have to stick by it. And you have to make sure that you don't bend to circumstances of life or of a particular sector just to achieve something, but then you stick to what you believe and you're disciplined in your field enough that people see it and people want to work with you because they see that discipline, they see that excellence in you. So that's the advice that I would give.
I think that's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that. The bonus question we have, which we ask all our guests, you can probably guess if you've listened to any of our previous episodes, is if you were to travel anywhere in Africa on an all expense paid trip, where would it be and why?
I would say East Africa, Zanzibar. And the reason for this is that I'm a beach baby. I love a good, clear blue sea, and I love a white beach sand as well. So I think Zanzibar is a perfect destination for people like me who love to be on the beach and who love water, who love the sea, and who love to see the planet clean as well. So Zanzibar has one of the most beautiful oceans I think in the world. So I would definitely say Zanzibar.
Lovely. That brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you very much, Edma. This has been really
Beatrice, and thank you, Balaji.